Okay, let's unpack this. Picture this. May 9th, 2025.
Right.
The professional cleaning and restoration industry gets hit with some, well, incredibly unexpected news.
Totally out of the blue for many.
Yeah, JonDon, a name that's been around since, 1978? A real leader, 22 locations.
Big footprint, coast to coast.
Just abruptly stops operating. Finished. Done.
And the official line was severe financial hardships.
Which, for a company that size, known for that Partners for Success philosophy, it was a huge shock.
Absolutely. A pillar of the industry, seemingly.
So this deep dive, it's based on the material you've shared with us, articles, analysis, notes, to really dig into why. Why did this happen?
Trying to connect the dots based on the information available.
Our mission here is to cut through the noise, pull out the really crucial insights from this material. We're especially looking at those big ownership changes.
Private equity angle.
Yeah, exactly. And the turbulence at the top, the executive level stuff, and how that all might have led to JonDon's collapse.
Right. Trying to understand the contributing factors. We want to give you a clear, sharp picture of what was really going on based on these sources.
Okay, so where do we start? The history.
Yeah, let's go back to JonDon's roots first. The material traces it back to 1978, founded by John and Nick Paulella.
Built it up over decades.
They really did. Built it into a prominent supplier, known not just for selling products, but for things like SFS strategies for success, that educational side.
Yeah, they really cultivated that Partners for Success idea, grew it to those 22 locations nationwide. They were a fixture.
And then, bam, May 9, 2025.
And the abruptness, that's a key detail the sources really emphasize.
It really is. This wasn't some planned, orderly wind down you sometimes see.
No graceful exit. It was just lights off. Immediate cessation of operations.
And that suddenness is so critical because, as the material points out, it just created chaos, widespread disruption.
Think about it. Unresolved transactions just left hanging. Vendors, customers, stuck.
And immediate job losses for all the employees. Yeah, unlike an orderly closure where there's maybe some notice, some transition, this was just a hard stop.
Vendors especially seem to have been caught completely flat-footed. Really highlights that counterparty risk, doesn't it?
It does. One day you have a major partner, the next, they're gone, and maybe they owe you money.
So how does a company with that history, that scale, suddenly hit severe financial hardship so abruptly?
Well, the material points pretty strongly towards a major shift in their financial structure as a key factor.
Okay, and that brings us to the private equity piece.
Right. The material identifies Incline Equity Partners acquiring JonDon in early 2021.
Now, private equity itself isn't necessarily the issue, but the way these deals are often structured, that seems to be the focus here.
Exactly. The analysis suggests a common strategy was likely used financing the acquisition with a lot of debt. A leveraged buyout.
Using borrowed money.
Right. But the crucial part, and the sources indicate this was likely the setup here, is that the debt gets placed onto the company that was bought.
Onto JonDon itself.
Correct. So JonDon, the entity, suddenly becomes responsible for paying off the money used to buy it.
Okay, I see. It's like buying a house with a huge mortgage, but the house itself has to generate all the income to pay that mortgage, not you personally.
That's a good analogy. So based on the analysis, JonDon likely took on a substantial debt burden right from the start of that acquisition.
And the material uses a pretty stark phrase to describe the result, especially when combined with other pressures.
It made JonDon exceptionally fragile?
Exceptionally fragile, wow.
Yeah. This financial architecture, maybe even layered on top of any previous debt, though the sources are clear, the 2015 JonDon thing was separate.
Right, important distinction.
But this structure essentially stripped away any kind of financial cushion. The material says it left them with no buffer against market downturns.
So when things got tough, they had no wiggle room.
Exactly. It's what the sources call an example of how financial engineering, even if aiming for growth or efficiency, can accidentally create systemic vulnerabilities. The way it was set up financially became a major weakness.
And this internal fragility, this debt load, wasn't the only issue they were facing, right?
No, not at all. They were also dealing with significant external market pressures at the same time. A real double whammy.
Okay, what kind of pressures?
Well, the material points to a sharp decline in sales.
Why? What was causing that?
Attributed mainly to increasing competition and also what's described as a market that was just getting saturated. Too many players, maybe.
In the cleaning and restoration space, okay.
And then compounding that, their operational costs are going up simultaneously.
The other side of the equation.
Yeah. The sources mentioned this was made worse by ongoing supply chain disruptions.
Oh.
We all remember those.
Oh, yeah.
And just general inflationary pressures hitting costs across the board.
So, okay, let's put that picture together. You've got a company carrying heavy debt from the PE deal.
Right.
Its sales are falling because of competition and saturation, and its basic costs of doing business are rising.
Exactly. And for an industry like this, distribution relies heavily on consistent cash flow. That combination, highlighted in the material, was absolutely critical. Squeeze them relentlessly.
That sounds unsustainable.
Well, it led to the next logical consequence, according to the material.
Which what?
It made JonDon unattractive to potential lenders and investors. Their financial picture was deteriorating fast.
Till it couldn't get help.
Despite efforts, the sources say, the company just couldn't secure the vital financial support required to keep going. The well was dry.
They were cut off from that funding lifeline they needed to navigate the storm.
And the analysis in the material really links this failure to get more funding directly back to those earlier points.
Oh, so.
It shows how that fragile financial structure, overloaded with debt and then hit by the market downturns. It just became an insurmountable obstacle. Their books likely looked so bad that nobody was willing to lend them more money or invest.
Which the sources suggest contributed significantly to that final decision. Just shut it down.
Seems highly plausible based on the sequence of events described.
And then there's another layer here, the leadership situation, instability at the top.
Right. The material mentions Eric Royes was appointed CEO in late 2023. So, relatively new.
Okay, late 2023.
But then, he leaves. He departed for another company in February 2025.
February 2025. Let's see. The closure was May 2025.
Yeah, exactly. Just months before the end.
The timing is very close.
It is. And the analysis in the material really digs into this rapid turnover, especially during what was clearly a period of serious distress for the company.
What does the analysis suggest it means?
Well, it offers a couple of potential interpretations based on the sources. One possibility, maybe the new leadership just couldn't implement effective turnaround strategies quickly enough. Or perhaps it signals an early recognition by the CEO that the company's challenges were insurmountable. He saw the writing on the wall.
That latter point feels pretty compelling, given how soon the closure happened after he left.
The material suggests it's quite plausible, yeah. And that kind of instability right at the helm, it likely hampered any unified effort to navigate the crisis.
Makes sense. Hard to steer the ship if the captain jumps overboard.
Right. And it also could have sent a really bad signal externally, like a major lack of confidence to those potential lenders and investors they desperately needed.
So that leadership change or lack of stability could have actually contributed to them not getting the funding?
It certainly seems possible, according to the analysis. It added another layer of difficulty and uncertainty right when they needed stability the most.
Okay, so the company collapses. What happens right after? The material mentions Aramsco stepping in.
Yes. Briefly touches on Aramsco acquiring certain assets of JonDon.
Assets. That word seems important here.
Crucial, and this detail is emphasized repeatedly in the material. Aramsco explicitly stated they did not acquire JonDon the company.
Okay.
And just as importantly, they explicitly said they did not take on any of JonDon's past liabilities. That includes outstanding vendor invoices.
Oof. So if JonDon owed a vendor money, Aramsco wasn't going to pay it.
Correct. The material even provides an email address, jdafbc@outlook.com, as the contact point for anyone trying to file a claim against the now defunct JonDon entity.
So where does that leave the vendors?
It leaves them, as the material puts it, hung out.
Hung out. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because Aramsco only bought specific assets, not the company or its debts, those vendors have to try and get their money from what's left of JonDon itself.
Which is probably not much, I'm guessing.
The material describes that process as fraught with challenges and uncertain outcomes, especially for unsecured creditors, those who didn't have specific collateral tied to the debt. For them, it likely means facing significant financial losses.
Wow. So the way the deal was structured post-collapse directly impacted whether vendors got paid.
Absolutely. It flows directly from the asset sale structure and ultimately from the underlying financial failure that led to it.
And the material even singles out one group, FCE vendors.
Yeah, vendors related to JonDon's factory cleaning equipment, or FCE unit. Aramsco specifically stated they did not acquire FCE assets or employees.
So those vendors are in an even tougher spot.
Seems like it. The material suggests an even more challenging path for them, as there wasn't even a clear successor entity that bought those specific assets.
Man. It just really underlines how the legal and financial structure of everything from the initial PE deal to the final asset sale determined who got left holding the bag.
It really does. A cascade effect.
Okay, so let's pull back a bit. What does this whole JonDon story mean for you, the listener? If you're in this industry or connected to it, what are the takeaways?
Well, this isn't just about one company failing, right?
Yeah.
The material draws out broader implications, lessons learned.
Like what?
First, vulnerability. Even big established leaders aren't bulletproof. Market position alone doesn't protect you from competition, rising costs, and critically flaws in your underlying financial structure.
So don't get complacent just because you're big.
Pretty much. The material really emphasizes the need for financial resilience.
Yeah.
Things like diversification of supply chains, having backups, and just robust risk management practices overall.
Basic business blocking and tackling, but maybe taken more seriously.
Perhaps. And this whole saga serves as a major cautionary tale. Understanding the legal fine print of your business relationships, like what's the real difference between someone buying assets versus buying the whole company, that becomes crucial.
Yeah, that distinction had huge consequences here.
Massive. And really assessing the true financial health of your partners, your key suppliers, your major customers, it moves from just being good practice to essential risk management. You need to know who you're relying on.
Could this change how the industry operates?
The analysis suggests it might. Could trigger a shift away from maybe a more purely trust-based model
Where a handshake was enough?
towards one that's just inherently more risk-averse. You might see tighter credit terms, more scrutiny on financials from everyone involved. People might be less willing to extend credit without more assurances.
So, why does understanding JonDon's collapse matter for your business, if you're listening?
Because it throws counterparty risk into sharp relief. What happens when a partner, especially one leveraged, like JonDon apparently was, hits distress? The ripple effects can be huge. It forces you to reevaluate who you do business with and how.
Okay, so let's try and bring this deep dive together then. Based on all the material provided, JonDon's collapse looks like it was significantly driven by a really fragile financial structure, probably overloaded with debt from that 2021 private equity acquisition.
That seems to be a central finding in the analysis, yes. Deep vulnerability from the start.
And that vulnerability, when combined with tough external market conditions, falling sales, rising costs,
The double whammy we talked about.
created a situation the company just couldn't survive. They didn't have the buffer.
Right. And when their finances tanked, they couldn't get the extra funding needed to bridge the gap. They were cut off.
And that CEO departure, Eric Roy's leaving just months before the end, the material suggests that could be read as a sign.
A potential signal, yeah, that leadership perhaps saw the writing on the wall. Recognized the problems might be insurmountable.
So it's a complex mix. Internal financial setup, external market pressures, and maybe leadership instability marking that final period.
Seems like a convergence of factors based on the sources.
Okay, so here's something to think about. JonDon was built on this idea, this motto, partners for success.
Right, that was their brand.
So how does its sudden collapse and the reality described in the material for all those vendors left unpaid, how does that maybe redefine what partnership really means in this industry? Especially now, as it seems to be consolidating and maybe becoming more financially cautious.
That's a heavy question. Does partnership survive when the finances get brutally tested?
Or maybe think about it this way. How can businesses find the right balance between using financial strategies like leverage, maybe to grow faster, be more efficient,
The financial engineering aspect.
and maintaining that absolute fundamental need for operational resilience? Enough strength to actually withstand the unexpected market shifts, the kind of shifts that ultimately took down JonDon. Where's that line?
Yeah, balancing ambition with robustness. That's a critical question this whole situation brings up. Something definitely worth pondering.
Come check us out at magicwandcompany.com.